can you tell me the story of how you decided to delete 33,000 emails and how that deletion was executed?
Well, let's start from the beginning. Everything I did was permitted. There was no law, there was no regulation, there was nothing that did not give me the full authority to decide how I was going to communicate. Now, I didn't have to turn over anything. I chose to turn over 55,000 pages. And now I think it's kind of fun.
2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton there in her first national televised interview last night. That's a great place to bring in our roundtable, and we want to welcome in Fiscal Times columnist Liz Peek, also rejoining us, investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner, Sarah Westwood. Thank you both for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Liz, let's start with you. When asked how Hillary managed to delete 30,000 emails, her response was, "Everything I did was permitted. There was nothing that did not give me the full authority to decide how I was going to communicate." Is that accurate, Liz?
Well, actually, I think it is accurate because my understanding is, going back to when all this discussion began, is that actually emails did not fall under the legal requirements to share government communications or make them available, but it is certainly against the feeling of the law, the intent of the law, etc. And, you know, I think it's just so incredibly typical Clinton that that's what she falls back on here. It's not that, yes, you know, deleting personal emails, which actually turned out maybe not to be so personal, and who was the judge of that?
All right, we're having a little bit of
problems. We're having some technical problems, so we're trying to get back to Liz Peek and let her finish her.
Yeah, let's get to Sarah though, because Sarah, you're an investigative reporter. 33,000 emails. I'm sure you'd like to get your hands on it. At some point, do you think this is one of the reasons why the former Secretary of State right now seems to be having some trust problems when it comes to voters? The latest polls right now have her on the end where she's like at 38% with trust issues right now with some of the voters in Pennsylvania and Ohio.
It's one of the main reasons that voters are perceiving her as dishonest and untrustworthy, because while she perhaps didn't technically break any laws explicitly, she certainly violated the spirit of records laws that require officials to preserve their communications. Emails are so relatively new that they didn't quite fall under the statutory requirements, but they should have been preserved. There's no question about that. And the fact that a neutral third party was never allowed to determine which records should be handed over to the State Department and which would be kept and deleted apparently by the Clinton team is really troubling to a lot of investigators, particularly the congressional investigators on the House Select Committee on Benghazi, who subpoenaed these records and who have faced a stone wall trying to obtain the documents they need to further their probe. It just feeds into the Clinton narrative of, you know, avoiding the laws in ways that perhaps raise questions about their ethics.
All right, we've been talking about trustworthiness. Let's take a look at something else Hillary Clinton said in last night's interview.
I have great confidence. I trust the American voter. So I trust the American voter 100%.
Would you vote for someone that you don't trust?
Well, people should and do trust me.
But do they? A recent Quinnipiac poll shows Democratic voters in states such as Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, over 50% of them see Hillary Clinton as not trustworthy. Take a look. There you can see it. We have Liz Peek again. Liz, sorry for the technical problems. Want to get your response about that. Is Hillary like in denial or?
Well, look, she doesn't want to have to deal with this because the reason people don't trust her is exactly what we were just talking about, the fact that she constantly sails on the very edge of legality. I mean, this has gone on for decades. What's sort of nice for the GOP, frankly, is that all this has happened to remind younger voters, one of Hillary's great constituencies, or hopeful constituencies anyway, that this is what the Clintons are like. They're never totally trustworthy. They always skirt, you know, as I say, the ragged edge of the law. I love her answer that she trusts American voters. Who cares? We don't trust her. And that's the issue here. And no, people won't, I think, at the end, vote for people that they don't trust. I've talked to a lot of Dems who just won't do it.
You know, I wanted to ask you, Sarah, the Daily Beast published an article saying that they thought Hillary played the victim in last night's interview with comments such as, "I'm just going to be my own little self and keep going along and saying what I believe." Do you think right now, with Hillary Clinton dropping in the polls, that her campaign is kind of spiraling a little bit?
Well, spiraling may be a bit premature simply because she commands such a towering lead over her fellow Democrats in the primary, and she's still likely to get the nomination. There looks to be no one in the field, even Bernie Sanders, as he begins a little bit of a surge, that could upset her from obtaining that nomination. But certainly these scandals will hurt her in a general election. If she goes up against a Republican who has a solid record electorally and who doesn't have this kind of baggage.
We'll have to leave it there. Sorry, Sarah, we're running out of time, but we're going to have both of you back when we continue our roundtable right after this.
Welcome back. Back for part two of the roundtable. Fiscal Times columnist Liz Peek and investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner, Sarah Westwood. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
And we're going to continue to talk about Hillary Clinton's big interview last night with CNN. Clinton also commented, as you might expect, about Donald Trump's recent statements on Mexican immigrants. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I'm very disappointed in those comments, and I feel very bad and very disappointed with him and with the Republican Party for not responding immediately and saying, enough, stop it.
But what about Jeb Bush's approach to that? It's different, certainly, than Donald Trump's.
Well, he doesn't believe in a path to citizenship. If he did at one time, he no longer does. And so pretty much they're, as I said, they're on a spectrum of hostility.
So, Liz, your thoughts. Is Trump hurting the GOP?
Donald Trump is voicing what a lot of people think and most Republicans don't want to say, which is there is anger about immigrants coming into our country illegally, staying here illegally, and increasingly being given the rights almost of citizenship with the sole exception of voting. Is he hurting the GOP? Yes, I would like him out simply because he is soaking up a lot of airtime, energy, and money, not contributions, because he doesn't need that. But this is, he's disruptive. He's going to be disruptive in the debates, which are, I just really can't imagine how that's going to go. And I think he's just causing people to focus on the wrong things. We have really serious problems in this country. Problems that Republican contenders have good answers for and solutions for. Nobody's talking about issues. They're talking about Donald Trump. And to that extent, yes, I think he's hurting the GOP.
Sarah, I want to talk about the debates coming up in Cleveland in early August. Obviously, the top 10 candidates will be on that debate stage. Now, the next 30 days obviously can be very critical. I thought The Hill did something kind of interesting. They actually rated who they believe will be on that stage coming up in August. They did this by national polling averages. And according to The Hill, Jeb Bush, Scott Walker, Ben Carson, and Marco Rubio, they are in good shape. They're in good shape as Mike Huckabee, Rand Paul, and Donald Trump. Just making the cut, Ted Cruz, Rick Perry, and Chris Christie. That appears to be the cutoff. Obviously, a lot can change, Sarah, but what are your thoughts right now about The Hill, who's in, who's out? I'm sure it's going to be a lot of talk over the next couple of weeks.
It certainly will be a huge matter of discussion, and part of it is just who gets the most publicity in the weeks right before the debate, because Fox News is going to average the 5 most recent national polls to decide who gets a spot on that stage. If one of the candidates says something outrageous or does something that sort of shakes up the race just a little bit and gets a bump in the numbers right before the debate, someone like Carly Fiorina, who's on the outside, could edge her way into the stage. And on that note, Ohio Governor John Kasich is going to be one of the last candidates to enter this race. Most candidates see a surge in their poll numbers right when they enter the primaries, and so someone like John Kasich, who doesn't have a ton of name recognition, who isn't very well known outside of Ohio, could actually make his way onto the stage just because he planned his launch right before that first debate.
So, Liz, Sarah just mentioned John Kasich and Carly Fiorina. Who is in trouble, you think, of those 10 that we mentioned that could possibly get bumped from that debate stage?
Yeah, well, I think we'd all like to play debate poker, right? Where we get players
Right.
and others. My candidates for out would be Donald Trump for sure.
So he needs to fold, is what you're saying.
I think Perry should come out. I'd love to see a Fiorina in, and I'd like to see Kasich. By the way, I totally agree with Sarah. He will get a bump from his introduction to the race, entering the race. But more than that, I think what people know about John Kasich is very favorable. I mean, he has not been in the headlines. There's been no reason for him to poll really well. But when you talk to people about Kasich, A, he brings possibly a very big state, and he's won that state very decisively and impressively. B, he's really quite a seasoned governor and former legislator, and I think he therefore has a lot of credibility. Some people think a Kasich-Rubio ticket, for example, would kind of get past the whole idea that Rubio's too new to the scene, too inexperienced. So I think Kasich probably will somehow end up in this group. I surely hope so, because he's a quality candidate, and we need quality candidates on that stage.
Sarah, do you agree?
I agree that John Kasich being able to deliver Ohio is an enormous advantage for the Republican Party, because Ohio is one of the most contentious swing states, and it's difficult to win a presidential election without it. On the other hand, John Kasich's expansion of Medicaid in Ohio is fairly controversial, and it does rub some Republicans the wrong way. He's definitely a very viable candidate in that he has a strong electoral record. He's very well liked in Ohio. He has a lot of different policy ideas that set him apart.
And we'll have to leave it there. Sorry, guys, running out of time. It was so great talking to both of you.
Yeah.
Sarah Westwood, Liz Peek, we really appreciate your insight. It'll be interesting to see what happens.